Okay, Amanda, kicking it to you.
We're good to go. All right. Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Noyes. I am the Arts, Learning, and Accessibility Director for the South Carolina Arts Commission. My pronouns are she and her. I am a white female in my mid 30s with brown hair, and I'm wearing a black striped shirt today. And I am so excited to welcome you to our eighth and final session in the second year of our Disability in Arts webinar series. We are so thankful that you've chosen to join us today. Over the course of the past 7 sessions, we have covered a wide range of topics from digital accessibility, assistive technology, how to include youth with disabilities, and so much more. If you missed any of our previous sessions, please check out our YouTube page, which you can get to from the Arts Commission's website. Today, being our final session in this series, we wanted to allow time for reflection on the content that has been covered. So we offered our audience the opportunity to take the lead in submitting questions that still lingered. We wanted to hear your real world scenarios, your what ifs, and your but what abouts so that we could address them here together. So today we have the pleasure of inviting back many of our past presenters to serve on a panel to help answer the questions that were submitted. So please feel free to engage with our panel throughout the course of the webinar today and ask additional questions as they arrive. And before we dive in, I'd love to do a quick round of introductions from our friends from ABLE, and then we'll get started with some questions. So on my screen, Dory, you're to my right. Dory, would you introduce yourself first for us?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dory Tempio. I am the Senior Director of Community Education for ABLE South Carolina, and I'll give a visual description just for accessibility to make sure that all participants are having the same experience. I am a middle-aged white woman with blue eyes and dark brownish red hair. I'm wearing a blue collared shirt and dress pants that are blue and gray stripes. And I am really excited to be with you today. Woohoo!
Thanks, Dory. Michael, would you go next?
Sure thing. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Hanna. For a visual description, I'm a white male in his 30s with brown hair, glasses, and a giant beard, wearing a gray shirt or button down today. And my job at ABLE is the Senior Youth Programs Coordinator. So I supervise our Equip Coordinator, our peer-to-peer programs for youth, and our upstate school programs.
Thanks, Michael. Larry, you're up.
Hey, everybody. I'm Larry Wenger. I'm Vice President over Advocacy, Independent Living Services, and a couple of other programs here at ABLE. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white male with brown gray hair, wearing a dark blue polo shirt today. And it's great to be with you all today.
Thanks, Larry. Glad you're here. Troy, would you go next?
Hi, everybody. My name is Troy Hall. I'm a white male with black rimmed glasses, wearing a black polo with a metal quarter zipper. I am the Director of Youth Transition Programs over at ABLE South Carolina. So all of the programs we have in school and during the summer and some of our after school initiatives, our online services and peer mentoring, I just have a hand in that and making sure it all runs smoothly. So excited to be here.
Thanks, Troy. Boris, you're next on my screen.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Boris Klarich. I am a community access specialist. I am a white male, bearded, bespectacled, and wearing my flamingo polo today. Very excited to be here.
Thanks, Boris. Isabel, would you go next?
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel. I am the Equip Coordinator here at ABLE SC. That means I'm part of our youth department, and I work with youth ages 13 to 28. I am a white woman with brown hair, blue eyes, and I'm wearing a yellow button-up today, and I have pink headphones on.
Thanks, Isabel. And Sierra.
Hey everybody, I'm Sierra Royster. I am a white woman with short brown hair and a multicolored shirt. And I use she, her pronouns, and I am the director of capacity building at ABLE.
Awesome. Thanks, Sierra. Thank you, all of our able friends, for being here, and so excited to get into this conversation. So the first question is a really interesting one, and it had come up in one of our previous webinars on assistive technology. The question is, generative AI is often criticized for its environmental cost and social inequities. Is there an ethical way to harness it for accessibility, especially for people with disabilities, or should it be avoided altogether?
Yeah, I would love to dive into this one first. This is a hot topic that we see a lot. At Able, we are also involved in an AI project right now with Google.org, looking at the way that AI can be used in nonprofit spaces. So this is something that we're definitely looking at, especially as it applies to people with disabilities. There is no real quick and easy answer here because there are a lot of concerns involved. I mean, the environmental toll of running these large language models is in a lot of spaces understated. It is a huge draw on electricity, and we see a lot of money being poured into infrastructure to just house where these AI systems are. It takes a lot of strain, but unfortunately, the truth is, if you really tried to limit yourself to only spending your money ethically on 100% sustainable everything, you will most likely go to bed hungry with a full wallet. It's really difficult, but there is a lot of upside to it for what generative AI can do in the art space for people with disabilities. But what's going to be different is how you use it as a tool. So rather than teaching the mechanics of how to create the piece of art, the teaching then becomes, how do I engineer the prompt to get the AI to create the art that I want? And that is different. That prompt engineering is not the same as going through the steps of what you would do to create a portrait or create a landscape. Teaching how to create the prompt to give to the AI model to create that is its own completely separate skill set. And it's going to take a good bit of learning, not just from the educator standpoint, but also from the student standpoint of, well, how do I really communicate what it is that I'm trying to create? You can have a whole room full of people using the same AI model with the same prompts and get wildly different results from everybody. It's very new technology, and a lot of people are really, really reflexive in being early adopters and wanting to get in while the getting's good. But the truth is, that we're just not there yet to where it can be safely and ethically implemented across the board. There are a lot of good applications for it, but I think honestly, we need to do a little bit more thoughtful research into how it can be used and really what we want to get out of it and how we teach people to recognize what is created by AI and using it as a tool rather than a replacement.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Amanda. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to add in to what Boris is saying as well, in that AI is a part of our world now. It's going to keep advancing. So is the ethical question not necessarily just about environmental costs, but are we preparing young people or the people in our programs to be in a world where generative AI exists and gets better over time? We want to keep in mind that we don't want to replace the human element. So prompt engineering is definitely one way, but also, is the AI making things more accessible by translating the directions into something that's easier for someone to read, more accessible language? Are they using it to control in the future, like a mechanical arm, or someone who doesn't speak? Is it reading more accurately the things that they've written and describing it without them having to use their voice? So I think looking forward, it's going to become more and more ingrained into our lives, but that human element is the part that we can't remove. And we have to keep in mind, how is it making it so anyone can participate in these programs? I think an area too, where there's a lot of strong advocacy is in ethically sourced AI data sets. So what they train the generative AI on. So looking for something that only uses information that's in the public space or is using their own internal information that they have rights to can also be a great way to lean towards a more ethical way of using AI. I always think about my photography classes. One of the hardest things for me was putting it in Lightroom and then adjusting everything afterwards. Adobe has its own AI as well that can actually assist with those. So teaching the fundamentals, understanding why things are changing, but then using it as a tool to help people keep up with a world that's just getting faster and more complex, I think is something that we want to keep in mind.
Thank you both. Those are both really interesting perspectives, and I think helpful for this group to consider. In some of our previous conversations, we've talked about how AI can be a helpful tool for arts organizations for things like alternative text. Is that something that anyone feels comfortable speaking about?
Yeah.
Sure, I think it can be it's a tool that can save some time, but it really depends on the quality of the AI model, and then also you are, by kind of relying on it, you are almost outsourcing your voice. Um, Alt text presents at its most basic, it's an opportunity for you to describe an image or you to define an image in your own words. And if you are using images as a part of teaching or as an educational tool, you are especially in tune with what it is I am trying to convey. What do I want the ultimate message of this image to be? And that's not something AI is going to nail. AI is not going to be able to completely replace your voice or replicate your voice, not just in a sonic way, but in a what your intentions are and how you want to convey information. So we would usually recommend if you're going to use AI generated alt text to still go through and put that human spin on it, make sure you're doing editing and not to approach it as I'm wanting to save time by doing the automated stuff, because more often than not, you are still going to have to spend time editing. And we always like to remind people creating something and editing something are very, very different skills. There are some very wonderful authors out there who would never get a book published if they didn't have a good editor behind them to really get the story where it needs to be. So know your own skill set. If you feel like your time would be better served editing that AI alt text, then that might be an option for you. But if you feel like you need to nail down what things need to say, then it's probably going to be in your best interest to just make it yourself.
Thanks, Boris. Larry, I saw you unmute. Would you have any other thoughts you wanted to add?
I'm good for now.
Okay. Awesome. That was really great information. Let's keep moving because we have lots of questions to get through. But again, a reminder to those in the room, feel free to interrupt or add questions in the chat. Raise your hand if if someone sparks something that you have additional questions on. All right. I've gotten this question a lot from arts organizations as follow-ups from different webinars and different conversations. So what practical approaches can organizations take to improve customer service for people with disabilities, from first greetings to ongoing communication?
I'll do that one, Amanda. Woohoo!
Thank you.
We're going to talk about some good approaches that you can take. First off, making sure that all staff and volunteers have some training on language used in the disability community, maybe implicit bias, how they can support people with a variety of types of disabilities and the reasonable accommodations or supports they utilize. Looking at the way we present information to folks and emphasizing that not everybody is all about the verbal message. People use alternative methods of communication. So looking at visuals, looking at gestures that we use and our body language and how that all plays into communication with customers. Modeling inclusive greetings like, "Hi, how can I support you today?" Or "Let me know how I can best assist you." We all know the first impression makes the difference. So really making sure our front desk and our reception areas are not just physically accessible to individuals with disabilities, but are accessible in the language we're giving to people when they first come to get our services. I know all of us have a lot of verbiage and information we like to share with people, but sometimes it can be a lot to digest for individuals. So utilizing those visual signs and forms to receive our services and programs in accessible plain language, large print, or braille. We can even use picture cards or a visual communication board that has the specifics that our organization or programs offer to somebody, and then they can point to it or let you know what they need if they have intellectual, developmental, or cognitive disabilities. A really important component is making sure that we're offering people a variety of communication choices, whether that's phone, email, chat, text, virtual, or in-person options to discuss the services and programs that you offer. Another good suggestion is having that assistive technology available, and that can range anywhere from speech to text apps to hearing loop systems to screen reader friendly websites and programs. And probably the most important that I would suggest to any organization is allow extra time for communication that's needed. When you're working with people with disabilities, they will probably need more time, so you don't want to rush those interactions. Looking at support that you're providing and making sure that it's person directive. So asking them what assistance they need and letting them lead their own service experience. Letting them tell you what you can provide them to support them in utilizing your services. And understanding that sometimes people want that autonomy and their preferences may not be the one you would choose for them. And being okay with that, making sure your entrances, restrooms, service counters, and waiting areas are all accessible. I know Boris mentioned a little bit about this, but making sure your website and online services are, I never say this correct, so sorry if I say it wrong, but Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, accessible and compliant. Using things like accessible PDFs, captions on your videos that you may be sharing with people to know about your services and take part in your programs, ASL interpreters, and making sure that you have a system set up for how you're going to put those into place. Do people request them ahead of time? Are you having them scheduled for events, etc.? I think the hardest one for people sometimes is being willing to hear feedback about how accessible your programs and services are. So having a feedback tool that's anonymous and that is accessible, whether people use digital feedback, paper feedback, or over the phone providing feedback. I know it's really hard, but it can be so instrumental to your services and programs being inclusive and accessible, to having customer advisory groups made up of people with a variety of disabilities, a variety of cultural backgrounds, and a variety of age groups, because they can advise you on what will make your services and programs even better. And I always say to people, one of the first things I had to get used to was routinely reviewing not just the compliments we get on our services and programs, but the suggestions for improvement. Because when we're willing to do that, it only makes what we offer better. And we have a saying at Able, South Carolina, we're there to build relationships, not transactions. That means making an effort to learn the customers that come to your programs and services on a frequent basis, making that effort to know their preferences, know their supports. Because when you do that, word of mouth goes far and you will have lots of people wanting to participate. Sometimes we also have to acknowledge and include family members or support personnel that people bring with them, but remembering that even if they have somebody there to support them, that individual is still at the forefront for what's being done, and we need to let those communications be directed by the individual with the disability, whether they're a child, an adolescent, or an adult, and let them tell the person that's supporting them, whether it's a family member or a direct support professional, when they want them to jump in and help. Another thing we always like to share is that just remember that trust takes time. People building that rapport with you to work with you for accessible customer service, it's built through that consistent, respectful communication and how essential that is. And when we all provide that, it only makes our customer service even greater and more people will show up. And I even provided some supports, Amanda, a checklist and some other things that Mary will share after the presentation that people can have to help build that.
And I just wanted to emphasize a few things. Dory covered every aspect you could want to cover, but those are great suggestions. And I would add, a lot of times when we're talking about implicit bias, understand that sometimes you may feel uncomfortable. And that's just understanding, where your experience level is with maybe the disability community, but also understanding these are people. We're all people. And so when you go and somebody walks through your door or they are, coming in with a group of people, whatever that looks like, speak like they are a human. So a lot of times you find that people will talk like they're speaking to like a baby maybe or to a pet. And just remember that your tone is very important. And that is the first impression that you'll come across. And sometimes those are things that we don't really think about. We think that we are using the best voice, but these are still adults. These are still teenagers, whatever that age of the individual. Even with a disability, they are still people. So kind of thinking about that tone. And then I know Dory hit on this a lot, but be patient. But letting them communicate the way that they are comfortable and understanding it's okay if you didn't understand it. Sometimes the way somebody's speaking doesn't really work for me, and it makes me have a hard time understanding it due to my disabilities, but it's okay to say, I didn't really understand that. Can you say it again? Or saying, I'm having a hard time maybe understanding, is there another way that we could communicate? Maybe it is writing, asking them that preference, because sometimes we misunderstand somebody, but instead of asking somebody with a disability if I didn't understand that, we just maybe smile or nod and go forward with the conversation. And they may be asking a question. So those kind of little things that I think sometimes we feel are automatic or make us feel uncomfortable or make you feel like it's going to make them feel uncomfortable, actually doesn't help provide the customer service that you're wanting to provide. So just thinking about those things and how it really affects us. The other thing I was going to say is when we're talking about physical accessibility, when somebody's coming into your organization, the physical accessible entrance should be towards the front of the building. It shouldn't be at the back of the building where maybe deliveries come in or, you're using things for the arts center that have wheels, that kind of thing, it should be at the front. If everybody else is able to access the front of your building when they're coming in, think about how are they accessing that for individuals that want to participate in your organization as well. Sometimes that can really be discouraging for individuals with disabilities if they are told, oh, our accessible entrance is around the corner through the alley and at the back door. So thinking about that first impression, if you've thought about that before and somebody that needs that entrance, then that's already working on that customer service before they ever come in. So.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. That's all helpful reminders and really practical information that our orgs can really think about, ways to be inclusive and welcoming. Dory, you mentioned assistive technology. So I'm going to skip to this next question to dig into that a little bit more. I'm wondering if our panel could discuss a little bit about what emerging technologies are truly meeting the needs of deaf and blind communities and what's still missing.
All right, I think I can answer some of this question. My name is Isabel. Again, I am a person living with hearing loss, moderate to severe hearing loss in both of my ears. So I am speaking from someone who is hard of hearing and from that perspective. And talking about the emerging technologies for my community, from the hard of hearing community, the deaf community, first, AI is starting to enter the scene. So we've talked a little bit about AI previously, and AI is getting involved in this. We are seeing hearing aids and cochlear implants come out that have AI incorporated into them. So they're able to tell what is the background noise, what is it necessary to the conversations you're speaking, and able to limit those exposures. We are seeing glasses come out that people are able to wear that have closed captioning in the glasses that you're able to read through and to be able to better understand some conversations. So we're seeing AI enter into these spaces. Our hearing aids, I'm a hearing aid user myself. So my hearing aids, cochlear implants are now being implemented with Bluetooth. So they're able to directly stream from devices such as TV, streaming networks, phones, to be able to connect to music, TV shows. So you're able to hear better from those perspectives. If you are someone who uses hearing aid technology like me, I use the Bluetooth feature. It's very helpful, especially when I can't really sit too close to a TV, or I can't really sit too close to a screen, or I can't really sit too close to something that's going on around me. So those are some of the emerging technologies, but what is still missing in our environment, in our culture, in our community, is that one, these technologies are incredibly expensive. Right now, they are very expensive. They're not incredibly accessible to people in my community because they cost a lot. I don't know if anyone has ever looked to the prices of hearing aid, cochlear implants. They're a lot. So there's an affordability aspect that we're missing. And then we're also just missing a culture around the accessibility of these resources. So things that I find that the arts community could do to be able to bring the bridge over to us to where we are is that incorporating closed captionings on everything, incorporating closed captions for any kind of audio-based art. Even if it may look a little bit weird to portray some closed captionings behind a theater production, it could be a really helpful and opening experience to my community, to the hard of hearing community, as we're able to take in that information and read through it. So being willing to implement closed captioning, being willing to have transcriptions available. I find that a lot of recorded content that is reliant on transcriptions or has transcriptions available, readily able to go, I'm able to read through and I can understand the content a lot better, and I can follow along and experience it the same way that people who are not hard of hearing or not part of the deaf community are experiencing it. And then one thing that I also find is missing is just a connotation with music. So if music is attached to your art, if music is a part of the plot line in your stories, in your theater productions, in your art pieces, there's a lot of connotation that we're missing out on as hard of hearing people. For me, I can't really hear lyrics very well. I struggle to hear tones of music sometimes. If a music piece is really quiet, but it's an important part of the story, like I'm getting emotion from it, I'm gaining emotion from the story from it, I'm missing out on that piece because I'm not able to take in that musical description. So having a musical description ready to go at your performance pieces, where people can look through and be like, oh, this is how this is part of the plot line. This is how this is attached to the story. This is what I'm supposed to be gaining from this piece of music. I find that that can be really, really helpful. And that can really bridge between this technology that is readily available as coming out but the lack of access to it because of the affordability and what the arts community can do that isn't really expensive, that can be readily available and made available people in the deaf and hard of hearing communities. That's a little bit of my thoughts if anyone has any questions.
I was going to jump in and add some additional thoughts. Before I immediately jump over to some comments around visual access and maybe even deafblind individuals overall, I do want to just say that whereas we talked earlier, Boris talked about the importance of protecting the human and creative side of art and balancing AI with that, I'm much more excited about what AI is bringing at light speed, quite literally. Things just continue to happen so fast around accessibility. Real interesting project I'm following. A couple of deaf individuals are testing an app with AI that literally will take audio and convert it to on-screen ASL. And vice versa.
I completely forgot to mention that, Larry. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And vice versa. So I was nervous when I started reading about that, but when I saw that it was deaf individuals who are actually leading the charge there, I'm pretty confident that we're going to get something that'll be pretty amazing. So that's just an example. More broadly around AI and improving access, Isabel talked about glasses and some of these other gadgets and what they're offering for hard of hearing and deaf folks. And the same is true for folks who are visually impaired or have no vision. Either the ability to take a photo of an exhibit or a painting or drawing or whatever that art is and have it visually described to them by the AI, and specifically not by general AI, but AI that's been customized, tools that have been customized to provide better visual descriptions for folks who are blind and low vision, for example, is fantastic. And now we're at a point where there's live AI where it can describe video. That's still progressing. It's not quite where it needs to be, but I have no doubt by the end of the year, based on how quickly things move, that we will likely be there. So just the amount of access, there's just incredible progress being made. That doesn't replace making your facility accessible, taking steps to make art and whether it's visual arts or theater or whatever it might be, accessible, right? It still doesn't remove that need. These tools enhance access and participation. So all fantastic. Barriers, I agree, cost of the technology, although it is so much less expensive than it used to be, at least for folks in the visual disability department. We can now buy glasses, for example, for a couple $100 that do a lot that glasses that used to cost a couple $1,000s. That said, smartphones and glasses, because poverty and economics are such an issue for the disability community, for a sizable percentage of folks that we work with in the community, even that lower cost is still significant. So I continue to hope that things progress in the future so that there's lower cost technology. Hopefully that trend continues. So those are just a couple of my thoughts.
Yeah, no, AI is bringing a lot to our communities. I'm really excited to see that. What I am really excited, I talked a little bit about before, is that AI is limiting the noises that are picked up by the hearing aids and by cochlear implants. I know that I get really overwhelmed by just the amount of sounds that I hear whenever I put on my hearing aids, because they are all new sounds to me. I don't really experience these sounds whenever I'm not wearing my hearing aids. So I deal with a lot of fatigue from that. So I'm really excited about what AI can do there, about how it can decipher which sounds are important for you or for you to know, and then limit that so I don't really experience that fatigue like I do now with my hearing aids who are older. They are still working just fine, but they're older, so they're not really experiencing that technology. So I really am excited for what AI is bringing as well.
Awesome. Thank you both. I'm curious if you have thoughts for thinking about an arts organization that maybe is new to considering purchasing assistive technology to make available to their audiences. Do you have, does anyone on the panel have thoughts or suggestions on what should an organization think about before they go out and maybe make a purchase to have available to their audience?
Ask the people who will be using the technology to help you with deciding what products might be best, and seek some guidance from the community. That's always a big suggestion I offer. I think that's number one. Ask the people you intend or think will use the technology.
Can I add something, Amanda? I
Please.
think, and we talked about this at a previous webinar, planning a budget. You have to have a budget for what accessibility is going to look like in the community and how you're going to, the money that you're going to put toward that each year. And Mary went over some of that in the webinar that we did. But one of the things we also talked about that I would refresh everyone here is also look who in the community can you partner with that may have some of that technology if it's just one program or one event that you're not going to need it all the time. Because there are a lot of folks in the community that have equipment that are willing to loan it out, that are willing to share their spaces. Some may charge a minimal fee, or you might be able to work with them and you provide them something because they're providing you something. Because I know it came up at that webinar that a lot of people's organizations sometimes don't have a lot of money to buy equipment that they wouldn't be using on a regular basis. So I think looking at your budgeting and have that in your organization's budget and know how much you're going to spend and what that's going to look like, and so that you have that, but then also looking at avenues and community partners you can partner with to use some of that equipment. We gave some examples of agencies that will share like their hearing loops, and some that will share captioning equipment for events, but there's a variety of things out there. And I know the South Carolina Assistive Technology Program has shared some of their equipment for arts for just, a single event that they, that the organization wasn't going to need it for more than one thing. Just some other thoughts.
Thanks, Dory. Those are really helpful. Awesome. All right. Our next question is about building internal support within your organization. So what are the most effective ways to gain buy-in from coworkers, leadership, and volunteers to champion accessibility in your organization?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. I think when you are working with a team, when you are working with leadership, and you're trying to, maybe you're at that point where you're trying to shift the organizational mindset to prioritize disability and prioritize accessibility. It can sometimes be a challenge to really help everybody in the room understand why this is so essential and important. And I think everyone to some degree sort of sees value in this, but it is a matter of making sure that people see enough value that this is not an effort to check a box on a form, right? This is sometimes really going to be a big shift for an organization to think about. Maybe we do need to think about putting some more funding aside for different tools, or maybe we need to think about when we're looking at leadership practices, do we have a representative community in our leadership practices? So when you're talking with people, a lot of times people are at a senior level and you're trying to help them understand this. Some tools that are really helpful are going to be to make sure that you're demonstrating the value of this through data, so through that sort of quantitative piece, but that you're also spending a lot of time talking about that qualitative piece. So do you have specific stories of impact, right? That's the first way that we as people are really going to understand information is through a story. So is there a specific student that you've worked with that you have been able to implement some sort of accessibility measures and you've seen them grow and succeed or take value away? That's the kind of story that's going to impact leadership to think about restructuring or buying into new tools. And then as many of those as you can get from as many varied perspectives, that's going to be, I would say, probably the first piece. But then in addition to that, once they kind of understand that level of value, you do want to be able to back it up by saying things like 1 in 3 South Carolinians are people with a disability, right? You want to make sure that people understand that the disability community is a huge part of the consumer market, right? They're a huge part of whatever market you're speaking to. And I would be willing to bet if you're able to kind of have this conversation about disability and maybe redefine it in as broad a terms as it deserves to be redefined in, people start to realize how connected they are to that community. I'm sure that's happened over the course of these webinars too. So it's sometimes people not involved in the community think it might just mean, oh, it's blind, it's deaf, it's people who use a wheelchair, when in fact it's this whole wide, beautiful universe. So making sure you have that human element, making sure you have the qualitative data, the quantitative data to back that up and to back up that impact. And then for me, I think it's really important to help leadership understand that it's a matter of justice, right? So it's not just practical, but it really is, if I can be a little grandiose, it's kind of being on the right side of history, right? I think it really is, if you are trying to invest in an organization and really build it for the future, having accessibility at the forefront is going to be essential. I would even go so far as to say that if you can talk with leadership and you have the opportunity to try and create this buy-in through conversations or pitches or whatever access you have, you want to make sure that it is stressed that this does have to be really kind of a fundamental tenet of the organization that you're in. So because when people kind of do this in half measures, that's where we still see people excluded. So it doesn't mean that you have to do everything 100% right away, but ideologically speaking, you want people to be really, really invested. Yeah, and then I think the other part is making sure that there are people within the organization that are going to continually champion this cause, right? So we want everyone to be able to have some sort of buy-in, but you want to make sure that there are key staff members who are constantly going to be asking these questions and to be pushing for accessibility, and to be able to kind of go to development sessions like this and learn about accessibility and bring that back to the larger organization, right? You want to make sure that there are key people who, this isn't just kind of a goal you have for this quarter, or this isn't like the theme of the year, that you've got people who really are going to be there long term to implement this as a big part of your organization.
Can I add just a few things here as well? One of the things I like to do is make it personal. I know Troy sharing that human experience. I often will start with a group and say, do you know anybody in your life that you care about as a person with a disability? The program, the services, your organization who they're providing in the community, do you think those individuals would benefit from being involved in what you do? Because making it personal sometimes and sharing a story is very important. I think we hear a lot of those, but when we make it personal and we can identify somebody in our own lives, then we can start thinking, because we have a bigger purpose, sometimes a personal purpose. So that's one of the ways that I like to kind of help those around us, volunteers, leadership, whatever that looks like. Because those that we care about, we want them to be involved and we want them to live as full lives. And then the other thing is, I feel a lot of people and organizations aren't that they're not trying to make their programs accessible. They are, but they have no clue what that means. A lot of times we see, well, you have to tear down the front of your building and build this expensive ramp, or, we have to buy these expensive things and we don't even know how to do it. Going and finding examples of how this has been done, from the very minimal things of just signage to maybe it is a ramp eventually. But those in between pieces, there's a lot of disabilities that have different accessible needs, access needs. And so maybe if you're even going online, finding a YouTube video, finding a reel, there's lots of people that kind of share their journey to arts and how they love to dance, or what that looks like, or how they joined this theater group. All those different things, whatever that looks like for your organization, having the examples of how this can be done, that it's not impossible, sometimes gives us a goal that we're striving for. Sometimes if you don't know the route to accessibility, it feels like this very up in the clouds idea, or you're not really sure how to do it. It's just a big dream. But if we can give some goals of, this is what we want to get to, and this is like the end result, knowing that it will probably evolve, just as every organization and program does. But if we have somewhere that we're aiming, then it sometimes helps people kind of understand the bigger picture. And then I think Dory touched on this earlier. I think we've touched on it a couple of times, but preparing your budget. So when we talk about accessibility, staff often feel like, I don't know how they're going to, how we're going to make anything accessible. It's going to cost money. But if you've already set aside money for accessibility and access needs in your budget, and you've made a space for that, then staff don't feel like they can't go forward with making these changes, whether it be printing Braille, or whether it be accessing AI through glasses, or whatever that technology is, and whatever your budget allows. If you've done that on the front end, where nobody has signed up and registered for a sign language interpreter, but we're going to just put money in the budget in case they do, instead of somebody asking and requesting for that, and you go, we don't have any money left for that, and then staff kind of feel like their hands are tied to this of, we can't offer that. Knowing that they have a certain budget that they have to stick in to. So, and that's, a lot of leadership conversations as well, but that's where some of those other pieces, that data that Troy talked about, all those other pieces kind of help that conversation along. So it is just an ongoing process. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll just add in terms of that previous point, specifically for South Carolina arts-based organizations, reach out to Mary Reeves at just at Able South Carolina. If you think we're accessible, we want to be more accessible. Our team is happy to come visit you. We're happy to do the assessment. We're happy to look at your site. I see Boris is nodding his head. This is what we get excited about. We get excited about finding creative ways to make your organization and your program accessible in a way that fits your audience and your organization. So just all you got to do is reach out to us. And thank you again to the leadership from the Arts Commission just for making that possible.
Thank you all. That's all just so helpful reminders. I really appreciate both Sierra and Troy talking about making it personal and helping leadership understand that if your organization is more than five people, potentially someone, is among you has a disability, and like making it personal, helping them understand that, I think is so helpful. And then I also really appreciate, Troy, you talking about making an a tenant of your organization, but also having that person that is kind of assigned as their role is to make sure that they're keeping an eye on it and keeping that lens for the organization. And I often talk with arts organizations about assigning that accessibility coordinator. And I think sometimes people can be a little bit scared to have, I don't want to be that person. I don't have all the answers. And I think just like David said, like you don't have to have all the answers. None of us have all the answers, but having that a person that's ready to find the answers and to have the conversations and find the connections with community partners and experts that are outside of your organization. They exist and they wanna partner and help you move forward. So thank you all for those collective thoughts. And on the conversation of budgeting and thinking about funding, our next question is around funding sources. So anyone have thoughts or suggestions around what funding sources or grants exist to support accessibility initiatives, and how can small organizations access them?
Sure, I'm happy to start. But I'm also going to ask because I'm driving through a rural part of the country. Excuse me, I'm riding as my wife is driving. But just if I miss anything, please, Larry, please jump in. I think as we're in this current environment, our own organization, we're facing this as well. I think now more than ever is to reestablish the partnerships, establish what you believe in, identify what you do, how you do it, and how you do it better than anyone else. And now's the time to tell that story. You gotta tell that story to your funders, to your partners, to all your collaborators. If we are waiting in terms of specific to us and say, I need this, this, and this that fit exactly what you're trying to fit into that pigeonhole, we may be waiting for a long time. As a former funder, in terms of myself, we often have to wait until organizations come and present ideas to us. Here are the situations, here are the opportunities, and here's how we can solve this. So I would re-emphasize that now is the time to re-strengthen your partnerships with all your funding organizations. Tell them like, here's where we would like to go. How can we establish a partnership to make this happen? I think a prime example of this is what the South Carolina Arts Commission has done. They saw a very broad vision of what they wanted to accomplish. They were not quite sure how they wanted to do it, but then we just began conversations and began really, really solid development of what we could do together. We're really excited in terms of that. And I don't know if Larry might want to add anything to that.
I can jump in, but Larry, if you have, feel free to interrupt along the way if anyone else has thoughts. Thank you, David. And for folks that live in South Carolina, there is funding available for accessibility initiatives around the arts through the South Carolina Arts Commission. We have a rolling grant, so that means it's open throughout our fiscal year. So starting in July, it will reopen. It's a up to $2,500 grant to help make your programs and facilities more accessible to people with disabilities. So our hope at the Arts Commission is to make arts as accessible as possible across the state. So for those of you that don't live in South Carolina, there may be partnerships that exist at your Arts Commission or other funders throughout the state that you may have not looked into. So it's definitely something to know and to be aware of what resources exist. And if you live in South Carolina, please give me a call and I'll be happy to share how we can potentially support your initiatives.
And Amanda, following up on that last thought, that if you're in another state, if you're exploring a different type, a similar type of partnership, with your same arts commission, or if you're an arts commission looking to partner with your Center for Independent Living, contact myself or Amanda or both of us. We would love to share just what we've learned as part of our partnership and how we have framed this. And we will probably be happy to share just a letter so that to your partnering org so that you can make this happen in your own states.
Thanks, David. Any other thoughts around funding before we move on? Okay, awesome. If more come to mind, feel free to unmute or drop some thoughts in the chat. Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. This next question is about staff preparedness. How can instructors better prepare for youth with disabilities, especially when information isn't disclosed in advance?
Sorry, everyone, my mic would not unmute, but I will jump in here. I work with youth constantly. I walk into classrooms all the time and have no idea what I'm walking into. And that is just the reality of working with youth sometimes. They're not going to be forefront with accommodations, what their disability is. They're still coming into their own. They're still learning to be confident in it. They're still learning what accommodations work for them. But I say be prepared for any possibility. Come with several forms of engagement. Come with forms of engagement that involve movement. Come with forms of engagement that involve arts like drawing. Come with forms of engagement that let them choose their own path, choose their own capability of showing progress, of showing education, of showing learning. So make sure that you keep things very, very broad. Come with different forms of communication. Are youth in your classrooms able to communicate through images? Are they able to communicate through writing? Are they able to communicate verbally? Are they able to communicate and gather information from audio, from video? So what come with forms of communication, come with different forms of engagement. So be prepared for any of those kinds of possibilities, because this is going to really open up your settings. It's going to really open up your engagement. It's going to really open up your education, your classroom to a lot of different people and a lot of different capabilities. And you're going to be able to get the youth involved because they're going to be like, I really like, if I want to answer something, I really like to be able to have an image of that answer. Let's say that you ask a question of, what kind of artwork is this? And you give a picture of a still life or you give a picture of a portrait. I don't know the difference. I'm not an artist, but I'm going to guess that's a different thing. And you're like, here. And the youth is able to pass that image. And they're like, this is what I think that is. And they never really have to even verbally interact with you. That's not something they're comfortable with. And they're able to explore different motives and different avenues of their conversation, their communication, and their education. So I say just come prepared, be really creative, be ready to change at a moment's notice, be ready to bring in different paths and avenues of communication.
Awesome. Thank you, Isabel. I'm going to jump in and add some things too. Isabel's exactly right. Being flexible is probably and creative is the biggest skills that you can have in these situations. I do want to give you a heads up. You'll never be entirely fully prepared, especially when it comes to youth. Someone's going to show up and need an
Being not
interpreter.
prepared is the prepared.
That's right. Being comfortable in the uncomfortable. And someone's going to need an interpreter or a PCA and they didn't communicate that. So trying to find ways to engage them, creating a culture of inclusion, of participation, where they don't just sit back and watch. We are finding ways for them to participate as well. And as that becomes the expectation, they're more likely to offer solutions for how they can do something too. They're an active participant, even if other parts of their lives haven't encouraged that skill to be developed. I also wanted to shout out the last group who was talking about, or the group before that was talking about having interpreters and putting that in your budget. Having that flexibility in your budget allows you to adapt a lot faster. Already having the tools, knowing different types of accommodations, or having partners that you can reach out to like SCATP or anyone else who might have devices. Also, depending on what it is, you can also bring it from home. You don't have to have a communication board if they already have one and they're willing to bring it. If they have things that adapt the tools for art, they can bring those and use their own. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't invest in them if they don't have them or to have some that are ready, but there's no reason why someone has to stop using their tech just to use yours, unless that's the lesson that we're learning, right? Is how to use a different form of tech. So a lot of times people already have access to things that they can bring as long as they're comfortable doing that. Isabel, I saw you on mute. You want to jump back in?
Oh, no, sorry. I was just thinking and I forgot to mute myself.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you both for those thoughts. Those are such practical, just important things to keep in mind when working with youth with disabilities. Thank you. So now kind of stepping back even broader, thinking about arts organizations and staff as a whole, what should training for staff and volunteers look like to build confidence and capability in supporting participants with disabilities?
Awesome.
Anyone feel free to jump in.
So I think something that's important in this area is to include people with disabilities in the training, especially organizations who are led by and run by people with disabilities, and their specialty is representing people with disabilities, like Able South Carolina. Might be a little biased because I work for them. But having people with disabilities come in and talk not only makes it more accessible for individuals who may not identify as having disabilities, seeing that they're capable of doing the activities, but also giving you real world solutions. The more that we expect to see people with disabilities in these environments, doing these jobs, using these skills, the easier it is for everyone to think of solutions and automatically think of them being included instead of that being a barrier or a hill that they've never thought about before. That and the lived experience they have. Every disability, there might be a category that they're diagnosed with, but that doesn't mean it's the same for every single person. I personally have combined type ADHD, and while I might have things in common, the specific accommodations that work for me will not necessarily work for other people. A perfect example in this meeting is that I use captions to help me track when there's lots of things going on, whereas other people with ADHD, the additional captions might be a distraction. So it just depends on the individual, and working with people with disabilities helps you navigate those paths and have more experience in those areas.
Yeah, and then this time I did have a thought that I muted myself for, so I'll jump in here. I just finished a little bit of a training series myself with the EQUIP program where we were working with professionals to learn how to support youth's emotional development. And really what I emphasized in this training was practicing the skill. So make sure that you're dedicating time in any kind of training spaces where you're giving advice, where you're giving solutions, where you're talking through some skills for practicing. And make sure that that practice space is a safe space. Mistakes are going to happen while we're learning. That is okay. We in the disability community, we understand that mistakes happen while we're learning about disability and about accessibility and about accommodations and about our culture. So we're understanding of those mistakes and we know they're going to happen. And we know for people who this is a brand new skill or they're just learning it or just practicing it, mistakes are going to be pretty common, and we're able to adjust and correct people and inform. And a lot of people in the disability community, they're willing to talk about and educate the others around them, especially if we're working like the space like this in Able, South Carolina, where all of us are immediately ready to jump in the bit and talk about our disability. So making sure that we're providing space for practical skill building, for practice, for role playing through these things, and for creating a safe space where we are okay with mistakes. Mistakes are understandable. Mistakes are learning.
I would add in here too some other aspects to include when we're thinking about what to train staff and volunteers on is looking at the language the disability community utilizes, whether that's person first language or identity first, and having an understanding of that. Probably also helping people to understand the different categories of disability can be really instrumental. Not everybody may have exposure or background to what disability is and how it impacts individuals because they're just in that. Just because you meet one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. And so really knowing that's important. Also helping people to know what the different reasonable accommodations or the plain language word supports that people may utilize that have a variety of disabilities. Michael mentioned captioning. He uses it as a person with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I use it as a person with the developmental disability to make sure I'm grasping the information that's coming across that screen. And then somebody else with a hearing disability may be utilizing it to understand, to just be able to know what's being discussed, period, as part of communication. So I think understanding supports and how people use those supports, and then also knowing how to implement those supports and knowing basic strategies for interacting with people with a variety of disabilities. Much of what we taught many of you on these webinars, your staff and volunteers need to know that as well. Because I think it's phenomenal that so many of you showed up at all of this webinar series and were so welcoming of the information. And we could tell that based on the follow-up office hours and emails some of you sent wanting to know. And how great is that? But then you're the carrier of the knowledge, but you can't be the only carrier of the knowledge. You have to be able to disseminate it to other people who can then share it beyond, because you can't be in every situation 24/7 that might go on within your programs and organizations. And so I think knowing all of those things are so important. And then the other thing I would probably add that I'll also talk about when we talk about outreach and partnering with organizations, what I would add this to training, who is going to be the designated person that is going to be the contact person to support those customers with disabilities or the program participants in your programs and services. Because what we've learned, and I will just tell you in working with so many organizations in the last, I've been able doing this now almost 14 years, coming in the fall, is that when there are too many people in the pot, it makes things more confusing for the organization. So having a designated person that those requests are going to come through when people register, or even people show up without registering, knowing who is that designated person, it can help solve some of those accommodation needs and some of those programmatic requests that you're getting. Whereas if we're trying to have 10 people do that, it can be really confusing. And I will say, as an organization, we've learned that through trial and error over the years, knowing that it's better for one person to be that designated person for either that event, program, service, or if somebody needs an accommodation that seeks it from us, getting our independent living services, because it can get really complicated fast when, you know, that old phrase, too many cooks are in the kitchen. So being able to simplify that not only simplifies it for you as the person coordinating it within your organization, but it simplifies it for the individual with a disability seeking out your programs and services. Because if they have to go through 10 people to get what it is they need or want, they may say, well, this is too complicated, I think I'll not participate. And that's not what anybody wants. It's not intentional, but it can happen sometimes without us even realizing it.
I do just want to chime in real quick on this one too. When we are thinking about training for staff, volunteers, or whoever, in order for them to help youth develop these skills, we can sometimes from the outside have this perspective that the training is going to be like this really advanced technical piece of how do we learn these segregated techniques to deal with quote unquote these students, right, or these youth, which obviously everyone who's been joining these webinars, you know that's not the case. But if we're hypothetically trying to talk about what are the training resources we want to share with staff, the other thing, and this is kind of, Dory, I'm going to kind of steal your catchphrase, not your woohoo, But your other catchphrase, when we think about the biggest barrier that the disability community faces, it's attitudinal, right? So when you're looking at training, yes, there might be some technical aspects to it, or we might be looking at certain tools and techniques to use, but it's also a mental reframing that this training should really be a part of, is, you know, learning about a different way to think about disability, holding people to high standards, giving students a safe space to fail, giving that dignity of risk, and really just, especially as educators and as content experts in your various fields of art, like just knowing that the tools and knowledge you already have are still applicable for all of these students, right? You don't need to throw it out and learn some brand new set. It really is just kind of complementing it with certain techniques and making sure that you're doing it through a certain paradigm.
And Troy, I'll follow up on that last point. That when we conducted a statewide needs assessment survey about 2 years ago of what the greatest barriers were within the disability community, it wasn't healthcare, it wasn't education, it wasn't employment, it wasn't rural services. Those are all incredibly high. The number one barrier that folks with the disabilities identified was public perception. The idea of what other individuals think that we can or cannot do without knowing who we are. So this is what is so great about this webinar series and the initiative from the Arts Commission, is really pushing what that perception is. It's intentionally pushing individuals with disabilities within public spaces and within arts communities and say, here's who we are. Now it's time for you to change your.
I think we lost David in the mountains. When he comes back, if he wants to jump in, I just wanted to add to, we're talking a lot about accommodations and training staff to make things more accessible and support like young people with disabilities. Another strategy we can use too is to implement these as just standards as they come up. So my wife is an orchestra teacher in South Carolina K through 12 schools. And one of the things that we talked about early on in her career is IEPs and accommodations. And the simplest solution was just to implement an accommodation if someone needed it for everyone. So if we're going to do extended time, everyone gets extended time. Now that's a standard. People can have that extra time to get things done. They just have to communicate that. Or if people need to get up and move because sitting still is not something that works for them, having a space that's like designated for that to occur. How are we communicating things? She uses sign language to communicate the need to go to the bathroom without interrupting the instructor. So they raise their hand in a specific way for the sign language for bathroom, and the teacher knows then that they can go to the bathroom. So thinking about how, when we're applying an accommodation, how can that change what we do as the standard? Because once you've done that and made it the standard, you don't have to adjust it again in the future unless we're adding in more ways for more people to participate. It's just a part of it. And it makes it more accessible for everyone with and without disabilities.
Thank you all. That was such a rich conversation and so helpful, and just something that's so helpful to keep kind of front of mind, and some of those same themes kind of you all said in different ways, in really meaningful ways. So thank you. And I really appreciate that broadly applying the accommodation. It's just like what Dory was saying, you might use closed captioning. There may be multiple people that are using closed captioning to meet a different need. And knowing that if we create programs and facilities that are accessible broadly, it's going to help the general, it's going to help everyone. And I think arts organizations want to be inclusive and want to welcome everyone into their facilities and programs. And so being thoughtful in the creation of those programs and spaces can really achieve those goals. Isabel, I also really appreciate your comment on training and having some hands-on aspects, and allowing people to engage with the material if possible. With within the Arts Commission, we had some staff training over the course of this last year, led by Abel, thank you, around accessible communications and helping our staff be better equipped to use the tools that are already ingrained in Microsoft Word or in Google Docs to make all of our communications more accessible. And during those trainings, we assigned some homework to our staff and we gave them an inaccessible document and asked them to play around with those tools, and then paired them up with other folks in the room and then help them work through how to make that document more accessible. So those elements really helped our staff advance in what we were trying to help our organization collectively be able to do. So many good thoughts. Thank you all. We probably have time for one more question. So I just want to pause and see if anyone in the room has a question that they would like to bring up, something that maybe they're struggling with in their organization, or maybe a thought that was triggered from the last little bit of conversation that we've had. So I'm going to pause for just a second to see if anyone wants to pop a question in the chat or unmute. And if not, I have another question, so we'll see. Okay, well, if anyone changes their mind, unmute or jump into the chat. All right, so I think this will probably be our last question, but it goes back a little bit to what Dory was saying. She commented, you can't be the only carrier of the knowledge, and I really appreciate that sentiment. So this question is for arts organizations and how they're sharing out their information. So how can organizations better communicate their accessibility offerings and build stronger relationships with the disability community?
I think that will be me. Woohoo! All right. So you know what? I think we all want to move beyond compliance because that's what it's really about. When you're building relationships and you're outreaching to the disability community, you want it to focus on intentionality, transparency, engagement, and disability representation. So I always say to people, be clear and proactive. List your accessibility features on your website, event pages, and materials. You could say something like, this event offers wheelchair access, ASL interpreters, sensory-friendly seating, and accessible restrooms. So thinking about maybe on your website or your event page, you're going to have a dedicated accessibility page that has the accessibility coordinator, their accommodation request form, maybe their contact information, and then something I always say it's important to include plain language descriptions. AI can be really helpful for that. And alternative formats for your communications, whether it's captioning, large print, PDFs, rich text format, alt text on your social media. You know what? Why do we go to an event? I love going to the theater. I love going to museums. I love being a part of the art community. But what brings me there is not legal language. It's welcoming language. So instead of saying, if you require accommodations, contact us, you could say, we welcome all participants and we are happy to provide accommodations or supports to meet your needs. Please contact and whoever that designated person is and their phone number and email. One of the things that gets left out often is that people with disabilities are not featured in marketing materials or the content. And we're not talking just as clients, but we're talking about contributors. staff members, volunteers, and leaders within your organization? Are you featuring those people in stories about your organizations? Not in an inspiration porn way, which we talked about at the first webinar, but in a way that shows them as meaningful contributors to your organization, meaningful artists, people who participate alongside with everyone else. One of the other things that can be really foundational is leveraging multiple channels. So sharing your accessibility information in print, in email, on social media, in real videos, REEL videos, and in person. I know that we just got an email about an event in Sumter and another location from one of the partners within this organization the other day. When you partner with local disability organizations and disability individuals that are leaders in your community, guess what? We spread the word. And when that word spreads, it goes far because we're seen as a trusted messenger because we are people with disabilities ourselves. I always tell people, how do you build these relationships with the disability community? Engage authentically and regularly. Have those feedback forums we mentioned before. Hold listening sessions and focus groups. Because when you use our input as a disability community, you are shaping the services, programs, and policies. And in the words of Troy and Michael, you are not just checking a box. You're including real life input from real world people who live it every day and experience it. When you're inviting artists or guest speakers to participate in your programs, compensate them because they're giving you their time, their expertise as professionals. And when you do that, that's seen as you see them as authentic artists who bring something to the table. Collaborate on outreach events, accessibility audits, and programs with disability-led organizations, and share those resources and credits. Co-branding, co-presenting sends a powerful message of equity. And equity, again, that we've talked about before, just means that everybody uses whatever supports or accommodations help them to be successful, whether you have disabilities or not. Hiring and promoting people with disabilities. Guess what, friends? When we do that, that shows true representation, whether that's through volunteers, staff, or artists that are participating. Show up in community spaces. It's great that we're going to art events, but you could come to our events too, because that shows that you have a real passion and interest in what the disability community is all about. You could sponsor, co-sponsor, or participate in ADA anniversaries or disability pride events that are focused in July around the inception of disability rights and the Americans with Disabilities Act. You could be responsive and accountable. When you do that, it shows the disability community that it matters what we say, it matters what we share. And then once you've gotten our input, if you've made those accessibility updates to your services, programs, or organization, share those and share that they came from community input. Do it on your website, maybe in your newsletter, at an event. And then for a resource leader, Amanda, I have some great things that people have sent us questions about through the training surveys, like accessibility statements, how to make things more accessible and how you advertise that on social media, and all that Mary can share later. But these are just some tools that go along with that outreach, because when we're doing all of that in that partner building, it says to people, oh, they get accessibility. Oh, they understand that we want to participate. We just need those supports, program modifications, or accommodations. And so we look for those keywords as a disability community. I'm honest, before I go to events, I'm perusing that website. I'm perusing that flyer, that video. Does it say the word if you need support or accommodations? And I'm like, ding, 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 this will be an accessible event. And we're looking on that social media. Does their videos that they're sharing have captioning? Do their pictures have alt text? Even though I don't use alt text or need some accessibility features, guess what? I look to see are they there, because as a patron, I want to know that this is going to be something that all people can attend. So we have some really good tips that can help with that, because just the little things really make a big difference. And the one thing I would leave everybody with: practice, practice, practice. You don't have to be the expert. Just be willing to learn, be willing to hear that input. And when we all do that together, then everybody thrives and everybody can succeed.
I just wanted to jump in. Dory made me think of a couple things for this one too. Does your promotional material include people with disabilities, especially youth with disabilities, as a natural part of your activities? Not the inspiration to the side, right, that they're special for participating, but are they just another participant? And there are many, many, many parents and professionals have talked to me about not even looking further to get to the fact where it says that you can request accommodations because someone with a disability wasn't in any of the pictures. So that's something important to consider as well. And I know funding is always a concern. If you're looking for a professional training to come out, is there a way that you can do an in-kind donation with your expertise? Y'all are artists. So is there a way that you could bring your skills to the table that would benefit both organizations? That's going to be a case-by-case basis, but it may be a way to get access to something that there wasn't funding for originally.
Awesome. Thank you both. I think that's a great place to leave this series and just wrap up all of the amazing content that we've been able to share over the past 7 sessions together. I'm going to drop the YouTube channel in the chat here in case anyone would like to go back and review our past playlist. And just thank you so much to Able for sharing your time and expertise with this group. And thank you all for participating over the last 7 sessions of the series. We look forward to thinking about next year. And so just keep your eye out for more information as we plan on what kind of offerings we'll be able to get into next year. But if you have questions or follow up, please reach out to me or to any of our wonderful friends at Able SC. And hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thank you.